And we are live.
Wonderful.
Hello to George Brown.
Hi, Mel. How are you? Glad to be with you.
I'm delighted now that I see you again. I'll just tell everybody that George Brown is the executive director of Highlights, and we're going to have a lot to talk about today. And before I forget who I am, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mel Rosenberg, and I am the host of the Children's Literature channel of the New Books Network. So, George, tell the people who don't know what Highlights is and how you created this Garden of Eden in the middle of nowhere, USA.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Mel. Yeah, so hi, my name is George Brown. I'm the executive director of the Highlights Foundation. And we're just coming up on celebrating 40 years as a nonprofit organization where our mission is to positively impact children by amplifying the voices of storytellers. And so while we think about kids all day, our actual work that we do is working with storytellers, adults, authors, and illustrators who have a passion for story. And we do that in a few different ways. We do some online offerings, as well as we have a retreat center in Northeast Pennsylvania. I think that's what you're referring to, our Garden of Eden. But it is a beautiful retreat center. We have about 20 cabins and a historic farmhouse and a large facility where we serve our meals. And that's really like our core location, and it's like a retreat center. I think a lot of listeners might be able to visualize their favorite retreat center or what a retreat center might seem like. And ours, I think that we're in that specific niche of thinking about how we're catering to storytellers, thinking about creating story for children and young adult audiences. So the whole way the Highlights Foundation started is my great-grandparents started Highlights magazine. My family is part of Highlights, which many people may know as a magazine and a book company that creates great fun with a purpose products for children. And that my father was the editor of Highlights back in the 1980s, and that's when he thought of bringing together authors and illustrators to think about creating story for children and what it means to do craft. And from that is how the Highlights Foundation has become a separate entity from Highlights, the company. And now when we serve just Highlights early on, now we really serve across the entire publishing industry and have authors coming to us in pursuit of all of their publishing activities. So.
Yes, you also had a publishing house for a time.
Yes, that was Highlights the company, not the Highlights Foundation. But there was Boyd's Mills Press, which was a trade book publisher, and that then became a part of Astra Publishing. And there are still plenty of Boyd's Mills Press books out there, and the Calkins Creek imprint is one that continues today, and we know much about.
And it just so happens that your area where you are is Calkins Creek and Boyd's Mills, and these are George. You are a man of words, and at Highlights Foundation, you have all these stones with words on them, and I'm going to purchase two stones in honor of this conversation because these are words that I've been dying to use my whole life and never had an opportunity. The first is scion. So you're a scion to a very, very remarkable family, the Myers family, and four generations of people whose mission is sharing their love for children's books.
Yeah.
So is this in your DNA? I mean, did you ever consider doing anything else? I mean, you're running a charitable foundation here. I know you. You could be the CEO of a company making cars or airplanes.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, I am a Highlights kid through and through, and just happens to be today my car is in for repair, so I'm in the Highlights offices, the editorial offices downtown Honesdale, as opposed to out at our retreat center. But I distinctly remember one of my first jobs here when I was about 6 years old. as I was the assistant to my brother on trash duty. And so we would come in after school and empty trash cans in the editorial offices. So from a very young age, having grown up and thinking about highlights, I've always wanted to be a part of highlights, and always just thought, what a neat thing, this idea of highlights and this belief that children are the world's most important people. So yeah, it's interesting. You meet people who, some people have always had an idea of what they want to be when they grow up, and other people, new ideas and new careers are coming to them regularly. So I feel like I've been kind of set on my path, and headed in that direction for quite some time.
Incredible. So the other word that I want to use is bucolic.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah. So these are going to become stones after our conversation. So, you get on a taxi at Newark Airport. You travel for 2.5 hours in some American wilderness. And I mean, like, I'm in Israel. In Israel, you travel for 2.5 hours. You're in Jordan or, Iraq or someplace. Um, and you travel for 2.5 hours, and you're really in the middle of nowhere. I mean, the retreat is located in a town with about 5 inhabitants, and you've just purchased the general store to turn it into your lovely office space, probably because there's no human beings around to buy things anymore.
Oh no, there's plenty of people in our area. Yeah. No,
I
we
saw nobody.
Yeah, we no, it is very much a rural community. And when my ancestors came here in the late 1860s, it was a logging community, and that was the work they did. And they then bought the general store and kind of ran the store. And so it is fun that just this summer we've purchased back the general store that was there and operating 100 years after my great grandparents had sold it to the neighbor. And yeah, I mean, it is cute. It's a small town, and we all know each other, and just a fun little piece of that. So when you think about it, my great grandparents sold that store to the neighbors, Floyd and Anna, and they used that store for 3 generations. They had a store there. Then their son had a tie making factory actually in the 1970s. And then their grandson had a financial services business there. So it's certainly a lot of generational pieces happening out there in kind of rural Pennsylvania.
A few words about your great grandparents, the Myers. Where did they come from? And how did they get this notion of entering the children's market about 100 years ago?
Yeah. So my great grandmother came from Boyd's Mills, where our retreat center is now. That is her family homestead. And my great grandfather was in southern Pennsylvania. They met in college in the 19 teens. They went on to teach soldiers in the army during World War One. We believe my great grandmother was the first female teacher in the U.S. Army. And then from there, they had
And
career.
and he had a PhD also,
Correct. He studied
100 years ago.
psychology, which they didn't have a field called child psychology at the time, but his interest was really in children and child development. And so he applied that lens to his psychology work. But they were educators for a long, long time, and they got involved with a magazine called Children's Activities. This was in the 30s and 40s. And over time, so they were working with a magazine. They learned editorial and what magazine publication was like. And over time, they would talk about what they would do differently if they had a magazine. And they spoke a little too loudly, and somebody heard them. And the company they worked with discovered this and sent them a telegram saying, "You're fired." And so that was kind of the impetus that had them starting Highlights magazine in 1946. So quite a thing.
And when did your Garden of Eden start?
So the Highlights Foundation, we're just coming up on 40 years as a nonprofit organization. And for the first 20 some years, we hosted a 1 week workshop at Chautauqua, New York, which is just an idyllic center for creativity and thought. And the Highlights team would pack up every year and drive up there and host about 100 authors and illustrators in pursuit of writing for children. And then over time, we started bringing small, intimate workshops to our homestead where we are now with the retreat center. And that's been about 20 years. And since the last 10 years, since we built the larger facility for food and meeting space, we've been able to expand our programming. So
So,
now
yeah.
we're, year round. Not a lot of people come see us December, January, and February, but we do have programs and people coming to our retreat center, really thinking about and working on their stories.
Incredibly, Harold is either coming, Harold Underdown, my mentor, is
Yeah,
either arriving or
yeah,
departing, and I have
yeah.
other friends coming of whom I'm intensely jealous because I was lucky enough to be at your retreat. And so I was with a group of about 20 other authors. Is that a
Hmm.
normal size?
Hmm. Yeah,
And
so 30 is about our max. And we run anywhere from 10 to 30 in a group, and it's awesome. Yeah.
but I'm just going to complain. I didn't get the Jane Yolen cabin.
Yeah.
I did get to interview her recently, and the reason is because Heidi Stempel, her daughter, was my mentor at Highlights, and she had her mom's cabin. I
Ah,
guess that. But next time.
next
Um,
time. Yeah. Yeah,
I,
for
I can
sure.
I can hope. So George, here's the thing that I noticed. I think that there's more employees at Highlights than there are actually people attending the course. So if there's 21 people, writers, storytellers, attending this wonderful Sunday to Thursday or Thursday to Sunday,
Mhm, mhm.
how many people work there?
Yeah, that's a great question. We must have maybe 20 or 25 on our hospitality staff because Mel, we're serving 3 meals a day. So we're basically open from,
You're not,
coffee.
George, you're not serving 3 meals a day. You're serving three experiences a day,
Yeah,
three nirvanas a day.
yeah.
And for those people who haven't been to Highlights yet, the chef comes out with her staff and explains all the food. It's really an experience. All
Yeah.
locally sourced food. The cabins are immaculate and comfy, and there's so much place to sit and learn. Um, and I actually managed to start a story while I was at the highlights and work on a lot of other stories. Um, and what I want to ask you now is, how is it that you don't lose money? I mean, even if you charge $1,000 or $2,000 for a 4 day,
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
I'm sure it costs you more. You have over 20 with just the hospitality and the food and all of the overhead. Um, am I guessing that you need external sources to break even?
Oh yeah, for sure. And so, in round numbers, we are a nonprofit. All of our 990 is found publicly online, et cetera. Our operating budget is about $2 million a year. And we are, much of what we do is fee for service. So people are paying to come. And over time, we've developed quite a robust scholarship program so that last year we were able to offer about 115 people to participate in our programs, both in person or online. And so, but we do look at our numbers all the time, like running a business, and we
No,
know
but
exactly.
yeah, George, I'm going to intervene during the
Sure.
interview a little bit. I just invented a word, interview. So I'm going to interview you for a second. So that's really important because if it costs, let's say, $2,000 to come, not everybody can afford it, and we both know that it's very rare to you have the great fortune to have traditionally published books, and many of the people I interview who have published books traditionally and have deals and so on, they had like a 10 or 20-year learning curve where they took courses and studied and had, as I did. I must have
Hmm.
spent
Hmm.
tens of thousands of dollars until I got my first publishing deal and my agents and so on.
Yeah.
And of the 200 people I've interviewed, I think that most of them have enough money because you don't make much money writing children's books. You certainly spend a lot of money learning the craft. Um, it's great that you have so many scholarships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think, uh, publishing and children's publishing is not immune and has um, been, identified as somewhat of an industry of privilege. And so looking at how we can help make more opportunities and create more access. We look at the work that We Need Diverse Books has been able to accomplish in the last 10 years of raising awareness, getting more books from diverse authors and illustrators into the hands of kids. All of these pieces are progress in making something happen in the kid lit industry for sure. So I think,
Okay, yeah.
yes, you're right. There are a lot of people who spend a lot of money trying to learn the craft, but I think there are ways to figure out how to do that without having to spend a lot of money, and that's through understanding what free resources exist, what fellowships, scholarships, all those pieces to pull together.
Okay, that's another discussion. In a perfect world, I would agree with you. But many of the people that I've interviewed found their agents and publishers by going to meetings and by having one-on-one sessions. These cost thousands of dollars. In a perfect world, I agree with you. And going to the Highlights Foundation, if you're going for a scholarship, also costs thousands of dollars, especially if you live in Israel. But luckily, I had a scholarship. George, I want to now segue to you and picture books. I know
Okay,
that you have a soft spot for picture books and
sure.
for authors and storytellers. Tell us what you love in picture books. You, George Brown.
Oh, uh, well, there's so many pieces I love about a picture book. I think the kind of the range that you get. So we just had a picture book retreat on campus, and every meal they read a story. And it was a great way to help the people who were there just to feel the cadence and the pacing and the variety of picture books. And so uh, those are some of the things I enjoy: the cadence, the pacing. Sometimes there's rhyme, sometimes there's not rhyme. Um, the message, right? Like the best thing about a picture book is it's got what we call that sticky residue, but it's not kind of knock you over the head with some sort of lesson, right? And so what is that? The enjoyment of the page turn and the thrill of the story. And that might be the humor, the unexpected, and it might just be the pacing and the rhythm. But then what is that residue that you're left with after you close the book? And there's so many, right? Like a woman who was just here showed me her book, and it was a picture book by Andrea Shapiro about the first person that hiked the Appalachian Trail, right? But it was a beautiful story of this journey. And then there was even back matter with some important facts about the whole thing. And so that's just an example of a topic that I wasn't even thinking of, and it was so beautifully told in a picture book.
Uh, I know this is going to be difficult for you to answer, but what are your favorite picture books? Let's start with growing up. What picture books did you grow up on? You
Oh,
didn't have a lack of picture books in the house, I'm assuming.
no, but I don't honestly remember specific picture books growing up. I remember highlights. because that was in my house. And I remember when we got into the chapter books and my mother reading I think Where the Red Fern Grows was one that like stuck with me. And then when I became an independent reader, certainly all the Beverly Cleary books, um, and kind of one of my first real connections. Um, oh, no, I'm gonna have to hold on that and see if I can remember the title of that book.
Okay, but now as a young adult, as you are, what if you were like to recommend to somebody, um, you know, some books over the past 100 years, picture books, classics. What speaks to you?
Oh, yeah, I'm not the person to ask that question of. I don't have a list in my head of favorite books or books that speak to me. I think from the craft perspective, when people come to us and say, I've got this great idea for a story, the first thing I'll ask is like, well, how is your picture book reading? Right. And that kind of that first step piece of advice often given is, have you sat down at the library and read 100 books in a row before you even think about what you're going to do next? And so, also, Mel, just a little plug, because we're working with authors who are working to get published and illustrators working to get published today. My response is always whatever's new, whatever's just coming out, because we want to celebrate the stories that are coming out today.
Absolutely. So, tell me a little bit about authors. I mean, you have met over the course of the past several decades, probably more children's authors than anybody. What did you learn about this group of human beings? And were you ever surprised?
So that's where my first connection, I'll go back to this piece now. Um, I was reading a book and I was in fourth or fifth grade. It was called Fast Sam, Cool Clyde, and Stuff. And it was written by Walter Dean Myers. And I wound up going to the Highlights Writers Workshop at Chautauqua and ran into this gentleman. And that was the first time I was awestruck by an author because I was reading the book. And in my mind, this book was amazing. And there was the superhero that created that book. And so that was my first connection of being able to actually tie book to author and kind of being starstruck by the whole thing. Um,
Okay, but today, looking
that
back
was
after you've met so many hundreds of authors, some of them complaining about the toilet paper. So
Sure.
without going into individuals, tell us about us.
So, um, I guess my what I've grown to love about the work we do is the meeting so many people with that same passion and that same belief that children are the world's most important people. And what I've come to appreciate how much creativity goes into creating stories for children, right? So people ask, "Are you a writer?" No, I'm not a writer. I don't have that kind of creative spark in me, but there's a lot of emotion that needs to go into it, mining of own personal emotions, as well as just the level of thought that needs to go into creating and a story that actually has that resonance to it. So I think, like in general, my sense of awe around creators is the ability to tap into that emotional thread that I think you would call humanity as you look at what makes a good story, good picture book.
And when are you surprised, George?
When am I surprised?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not quite sure, Mel, what you mean by that. I think I'm always surprised, and more in the people I meet than in the books. I think the books all have their own kind of special message to them. Um, but I can't say like there's a specific surprise that pops out as I'm looking through a collection of books.
Okay, no, I'm going to leave it in books, but you've also interacted with hundreds or thousands of writers, of authors, of children's authors. Are we childish? Are we petulant? Are we really nice people? Um, are we quirky? Go ahead. Nobody's listening, George. Just you and me.
I don't know.
And a few thousand other people.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think everybody is so individual in their approach, and I think what I guess, maybe surprised at is the variety of people that show up at the Highlights Foundation who are thinking about creating story for children. And just so this past weekend, let's take for an example, I sat at breakfast next to two women who have always had this story idea in them, and they are now trying to figure out how to get that out. So this is their early exploration into, I've got this idea, what do I do about this? And then the other woman next to me, she has her MFA from VCFA, and she's been studying children's books for 10 years. And she said 10 years before that, she'd been working on it. And so she was there with like 6 ideas that she was trying to move along. And I think what you get there is this great cross section of people who have one idea that they want to try to figure out what it's like. And you have others that are lifelong writers or creators, and they're continuing to develop those story ideas.
Are there other people like me who waited 40 or 50 years before taking it seriously?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I think one of the women I just met, she was a retired executive, and this was her retirement project, was to figure out how to pursue that. But yeah, we have a blog post by Ray Shepard, who was a member of the Highlights Foundation board a number of years ago, and it was titled "You're Never Too Old to Start Writing for Children." And it was this idea of kind of coming to writing for children later in life.
George, one of the things that I talk about a lot is acknowledging the odds and the miracles. The chance of having your manuscript picked up by an agent or by a traditional publisher is less than 1 in 1,000. Do the people visiting your Garden of Eden know this? Do people tell them during the workshops that this is a very rare event to
Yeah,
get published?
I think the reality of how the publishing business works comes across pretty quickly and pretty soon once you start getting into this. I think it's easy to meet somebody at a cocktail party who says, "Oh, isn't that cute? I'm going to write a book someday too." And then the reality of, if you want to get published, it takes a lot of work, and the work also has to be coupled with a lot of passion and heart. And
And
so,
and
uh,
heartbreak.
oh yeah, for sure, for sure. But it's like any other activity. If you really want to do it and you really put your effort into thinking about it and creating, you can get there. You can make that progress. You can make that happen. And I think too, like, we want to be thoughtful in what your goals are. Some people's goal is publication, and other people's goal is the pursuit of craft because they love telling stories, right? And so the idea of writing for writing's sake, or illustrating, creating artwork for art's sake, I think is also a healthy and good process, which may very well lead to publishing at some point.
Okay, you can see that I'm smiling. I mean, like my mouth is going to hurt now for 2 days. I'm enjoying this so much. And you're a perfect interviewee because you always are segueing into the next question. So my next question was about illustrators. You also host a lot of illustrators. For me, illustrators are these marvelous other beings that
Hmm.
have this gift that those of us who just write can only imagine. Um, Are they hard done by? Do they deserve a better um, standing in the community?
Oh, that's not a spot for me to opine. I don't know,
No,
kind
but I
of.
mean, okay, but as somebody, George, give yourself a lot of credit here. You've been with us for decades. Illustrators have a magic. We learn craft, and they learn magic. We are craftsmen, and they are magicians. At least for me. And then when a book comes out, even I tend to interview the authors rather than the illustrators, but the
Mm.
illustrators bring the text to life. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
talked about
Oh,
you talked about
absolutely.
cadence and page turns, but books are an experience. They're like a play. They're like theater. And they ring because of the artwork.
And I think that's part of the sense of wonder about illustration, right? Like, how does an illustrator read 500 to 1,000 word manuscript and turn that into a picture book, right? Like that ability of imagination to visualize those words and how they're going to lay out, how that turns into artwork that lays out on a page is incredible. And I think, I mean, we always think of authors and illustrators as equal partners in that book creation. So, a little odd the way you asked the question on how I should respond to that, but I think I don't know
No,
personally
because
how.
I think that illustrators don't get enough credit. If you look at go back tomorrow and pick out 50 books from there's books all over the place at Highlight, and see in how many of them the illustrator, the font is the same as the author, for example. And it's usually smaller.
Yeah, and,
And
and yeah, and I don't know. I wouldn't want to try to opine on that piece. But I mean, from a creative perspective, we see illustrators coming to us in deep in their pursuit and passion for creating art for children, and that's equally as strong as writers. And we see authors coming to us. Again, Andrea, who showed me her book, she said, look at the illustrations. This is amazing. Like when an author shows me their book, um, more than 9 times out of 10, they say, I can't believe what an incredible job the illustrator did. This is amazing. Right. So somehow there's that connection. And to me, that's where I feel that equal partnership is the author honoring the way the illustrator actually brings that book to life.
I'm so glad you said that. So as we near the end of this wonderful interview, um, a few more tips for the authors and illustrators. I mean, you've met so many of us. Give us some sage advice from someone who has a unique look at this. I was going to say industry, but actually, it's really not an industry. It's more of a calling. It's for me. It's like going to synagogue, being part of this community.
Yeah. Well, we are, and we are a part of the industry, but we're tangential, right? We are not, we're not a publisher, we're not an agent, we're not in that piece of it, but we play an important role in that teaching of craft and actually how to make that happen, but also in providing a space to get that work done. So, and I feel a bit of a fake because any advice I might offer is only gleaned from what I've heard in sitting through a number of our workshops and listening to our faculty who are actually the ones doing the work of creating stories and working away. Um, and the pieces of advice I hear over and over again is develop a regular practice, right? And people are lenient on what regular practice means. Some people set the alarm and they get up every day and they write X number of words or for X minutes. And other people, their practice includes just thinking about story because they can't write every day. But it's a regular practice of having story in your life and not just I will get to that someday. And I think too, it's that curiosity and that pursuit of craft, right? There are when you start getting deeper into it, right? We mentioned like page turn and pacing and like all these concepts that you really need to be curious to know how they work and to study them to be able to then figure out how that applies to your work. And so this idea of the pursuit of craft for excellence in story is one that I think is awesome. And of course, my favorite piece of advice is come see us, but it's also about giving yourself the space and time, right? Like you talked about the food, like the thing, our secret thing at the Highlights Foundation is helping you get away from home and not have to deal with whatever is on the news or whatever chores you have to do or whatever's happening at home. And so your brain is immediately freed up from much of that headspace that's taken up in day-to-day life that allows you to get deeper into your creative self. And so how do you even find ways at home to give yourself a block of time where you can let go of all the other pieces to be creative?
That's wonderful
That's
advice.
that's my
If you,
advice. There you go.
so I'm going to plug for you, Highlights Foundation. I think that you are a huge contributor to the quality of authors, to their ability to create wonderful books. And you also have online courses, and you have this incredible place and incredible welcoming of those of Michigan people like me who are doing this 24/7. Um, and congratulations to you. And so for all the writers and authors out there, if you have the opportunity to spend a week at Highlights, it is really life changing. And George, maybe I've been able to do this since I visited you at the end of August together with PJ Library. And I've noticed that the other authors who, when we're all in touch with each other now, so it also creates a community
Oh yeah.
of 20 authors who've been together for a week.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and I think maybe your biggest success, at least for me, is that I can get into this highlights mood, and I have the community people with me, and I can get into this feel. It's like some ephemeral feel, and in that space, I do create better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
That's my silly little sales pitch to try to get people to buy t-shirts and sweatshirts. I say you can always put on your highlights sweatshirt and help you get back into that mindset. But it really is, Mel, it's that idea of like what I think you're saying is you met new people, you've built a community so that you can stay in touch, and that kind of helps inspire your writing or you're even sharing with each other. And you've got a mindset now where you can say, okay, let me remember back to what it felt like when I was at Highlights to kind of get you back into that writing groove. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
great stuff.
we had great workshops, but the feel of the place, which you're so good at creating,
Mhm.
fostering, and this love of all the people who work there. Um, this is something that stays with it. You infect a lot of storytellers. I think that's the best word. You
Great.
infect us in a positive way.
That might be another
So
rock.
yeah, well, the rocks, I should tell you, everybody cost $100. It's a great way of. I'm going to make now an advertisement for you, because I wanted to buy a rocking chair and you wouldn't sell me one. So the rocks are a great way to help foster this wonderful foundation of yours. And I've already bought two. There's Scion and Bucolic. So I owe you $200.
Great.
This is
Great.
the first time an
A
interview
profitable
has
interview.
has cost me money, and we'll make it in honor of my mentor Harold Underdown. And I'm going to thank you from the bottom of my heart, George Brown, for this wonderful, wonderful nonprofit that you've engendered and nurture. And
Yeah.
my love to all the wonderful people there. And this is a blessing to us in the writing trenches. So
Thanks, Mel.
I've been with George Brown. You're also a remarkable person to meet. A joy to know you. So everybody else, I've been with George Brown, who is the executive director of the Highlights Foundation, a place where you should go. And if you can't go, attend online courses. And if you can't do that, buy a rock.
Awesome. Mel, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you.
Okay, so George, go out and come back, and we'll just wrap up, just you and me. And for
Sounds great.
everybody else, remember the words of Paul Simon, I am a rock.
I'll see you.
Thanks, George. See you in a minute. Bye, everybody. Hey, George.
Hey, looks like you're still pumping to Facebook.
I'm still doing the Facebook.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we're gonna stop.